following is a conversation with Heems, Himanshu Suri, for the Brown Voices Be Inspired project. I'm Punitha Rice. I'm the writer-researcher behind Brown Voices, South Asian American Experiences in Schools, which is re-releasing October 2026. And I am here with Himanshu Suri, aka Heems, who the New York Times has referred to as an art curator, clothing designer, loving uncle, political activist, and of course, rapper. You might know him from his multiple solo albums and mixtapes, his own record label Greedhead, or from his group Swet Shop Boys with Riz Ahmed and Radinho. Or if you're an OG fan, you might remember him with Das Racist. Heems is also the creator of Veena Company. Heems has worked with Seva, a Queens-based community organization, canvassed for political candidates who back working-class New Yorkers, and most importantly, has been a loud advocate for South Asians for years. Recently appeared on Bait. Latest album, 100 Alibis, came out last year, and I've been blasting it in my car. Heems perfectly embodies all that the Brown Voices Be Inspired project is about. Heems, thank you for being here for the Brown Voices Be Inspired project.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. I like what you're doing. It's important.
Thank you. We're going to dive right in. We're going to start with talking about growing up brown in K through 12 schools in America. What was it like for you being a brown kid growing up in an American school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, everyone's experience is different. I guess it starts with like where I grew up, right? I went to local public schools in Queens, New York, close to Long Island, somewhat suburban. A lot of like the place I grew up with was over the 80s became more South Asian. After World War II, a lot of vets came there initially and lived there. And it was kind of a development that was made for vets coming back from like World War II. Where I grew up in Queens was like on the eastern end, close to Long Island. There was like co-op apartments that a lot of people came back with the GI Bill money and moved there. But in the 80s, more South Asians started moving there as they moved east from like Flushing and Jackson Heights and places like that. So I went to school around a lot of South Asian people, and I think over time the schools got more and more South Asian. Queens was just very diverse. So I went to school with Indians, Haitians, Asians, Puerto Ricans, Chinese kids. And growing up, school was obviously like very important. I think our parents always instilled in us like the importance of school. And, you know, later I would surmise about like how they would judge how successful their whole idea of moving here was based on how successful we would be, almost like quantitatively. Like the more money we made, the more successful the biggest decision in their lives was, or unsuccessful. And that's like something I ended up writing a college essay about. My high school was really interesting because I went to Stuyvesant High School, the math and science high school in Manhattan. Tens of thousands of kids in New York take a test to get in, about 800 get in. It was extremely competitive. A lot of mostly Chinese and Korean children of immigrants, some South Asians, some Eastern Europeans, and then some white Americans, but it was very competitive. And like I said, a lot of children of immigrants. And being a child of immigrants is what shaped, alongside the literal actual education, the importance of education was instilled on me at home. And that would inform what my days and what my actual education was like.
Yeah. So much of like the research that went into the Brown Voices project is about the model minority myth, which is, you know, the expectation that South Asian, East Asian kids are just this like perfect minority group. They have no struggles. They excel in school. They come from rich families, which, as we know, none of that is necessarily true. There's so much diversity, so many differences within subgroups, and so mmany differences among, you know, our people. For you, how did the model minority myth show up? And especially for you going to a very competitive school.
Yeah. So this is like, yeah, I love this. Obviously, like when I read Vijay Prashad, Karma of Brown Folk, it very much like changed my life. It was one of my favorite texts ever. And like learning about, you know, the Asian Inclusion Act in 65 and the Family Reunification Act in 75, and like how many of the initial South Asians that came here with PhDs and masters kind of set the tone for what Asian immigration in this country would look like was one experience, but I didn't come from that. My parents came in 1980. We were very much a part of quote-unquote chain migration, and we were very much part of that Family Reunification Act, which to me signaled like, okay, we'll accept your lives. Like, we wanted you here for your labor. We wanted you here for the science program to keep up with the Russians in the Cold War, but like now we will take the rest of you. So I grew out of that working class, and like whether it's going to like an elite private college, or whether it's being in the arts, or whether it's being peripheral to the media industry or the finance industry over time, or even the music industry, I still represent like the working middle class American, Indian American experience. So for me, like even in my work, I like to talk about like the underbelly of the experience, which is just like we're still driving Ubers, we're still in 7-Elevens, we're still driving cabs, like as much as we don't want to air the quote unquote dirty laundry, and like working class experience shouldn't be dirty laundry, but we want to say we're the doctors, we're the CEOs, and like we're just leaving all these, as a storyteller, we're leaving great stories to the side to go out there and show this polished, colorful, almost like Bollywood color palette of like who we are, rather than just like something more gritty. So for me, yeah, I dispel that myth, and like, I don't sign on to it. So when we talk about like, look at the Asians are doing so well. We're really, first off, it's disrespectful to working class South Asians who come here. And the model minority myth has been too readily accepted by South Asians who are just willing to say, yup, we are the best. Look at that, instead of like, and those are the people that want to shut the door on other immigrants, like now that we got here. I represent those stories that are from between 75 and 91. When India was liberalized and when like the H-1B boom happened, and like respectfully, a lot of the people even making art or music that are coming from the experience with H-1B parents don't understand what it was like, or like what being here in the 80s or 90s builds you like I'm built differently, you know what I mean? And I'm proud of that.
It's crazy you just said that, because one of the biggest pushbacks that I got so the book that's coming out this October is a re-release. The book actually originally came out in 2019. And the biggest pushback I got was actually from brown people upset that you're making us look bad. Why are you talking about brown kids that are struggling? Why are you talking about brown kids that have special needs? We're by and large such a successful population in the US. And it's like, that doesn't benefit us to keep leaning into that. It hurts it creates a wedge between us and other minority groups. It creates a wedge within our culture. Kids who need help aren't getting it because we want to feed into this myth that we're all perfect kids, and our children don't need support. And it's so harmful to everyone it touches. So that's wonderful to hear you talking about both the harm of the model minority myth and the fact that you reject it yourself.
Yeah, and congratulations on a re-release. That's not easy to accomplish. So that's very that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
it's like important work, even like special needs. I mean, we can get into it, but like I represent an experience of mental health issues, and I represent an experience of substance use disorder, and that's like my history. And I think these are other things that aren't really spoken about. South Asians that might get left to the side that have ADHD or dyslexia or things like that because they're Indian, they're probably good at school, but or even like what the toll of like the extreme competition of like elite institutions does to like mental health for young South Asians, that competitiveness I was talking about at Stuyvesant. And I went back and I spoke to the students, which was a great experience. But yeah, these are things that like, I say that like this is the stuff that we brush under the rug, but it hangs over us like black clouds eventually, like, and it weighs down on us. So there's only so much brushing under the rug we can do. And I think it's just a disservice to our community to like not talk about, things that I think I want moving forward my storytelling to touch base on, that are like, failed arranged marriages, and like addiction and mental health and suicides and domestic violence, and like these things are occurring, and it's just a disservice not to, I'd say, like explore them as a storyteller, or to deal with them as a nonprofit, or to raise awareness of them with art. And if there's like anything my work as a service could do, I think it should be to raise awareness of those experiences.
That's definitely the goal of the Brown Voices Project. I definitely want to amplify those stories. And I think it's also so important we look backwards at our own experiences, at the experiences of our peers, but also looking forward. I've got kids, and I think about what their experience is like as brown kids now in the 2020s, and how shockingly similar it is to how it was when I grew up. And it's how when we grew up, we're probably about the same age. And the fact that so little has changed, that there's still so much pressure, that teachers are still buying into those same myths, is so disturbing, because so little has changed, and it's been like 30 years. And it's disheartening. So I hope that that can change. I hope we can move the needle.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from us. I would, I think people of like my generation, the hope is that they would break these kinds of expectations that weigh down on children, but a lot of them just kind of perpetuate them. And it's looked at as like hippy dippy to like, encourage your kids to just be good at what they're good at. And every child will have different needs and every child will be good at different things. And, I say like I see it with my nieces. I don't have children, but like, my thing with them is like building the confidence around the things that they are good at while working on the things that they need help with, but not solely focusing on that. When I wrote that college essay, it was about how like, the doctor, lawyer, engineer kind of like path, and that I choose not to go that path. And like, I thought I was like, I'm different. I'm going to go into finance. I'm going to go into investment banking. I'm not a doctor. And it was just like, eventually my career took me and like God took me like where I needed to go and where I needed to be into like the arts and stuff. But I understand being like risk averse coming from somewhere where like colonialism has taken everything from you, right? And like nothing's guaranteed. And so I don't look at it with anger. I try to look at it as like our parents are doing the best that they can with what they know and how they were raised. I think it was more frustrating maybe as a youth, like these kinds of expectations. And it still creates a lot of like turmoil within me of like commerce and creativity, like accepting the notion of being an artist, a true artist, versus like no, to go towards something more corporate. They want the best for us, our parents, and they want us to have things that they didn't have. They want us to be able to take care of them. And like, that's the system that they come from. I mean, they want us to afford insane weddings, which is like, that's different. Right. That I won't necessarily stand by. It doesn't come from like a negative place necessarily, but it weighs down on us and it hurts. At the end of the day, it hurts.
It comes at a high cost. There's a Pitchfork interview with you in 2015. I have the note in front of me now, where you said, as a first generation South Asian in the US, I often felt like I lived two lives, an Indian one and an American one. Do you still stand by that? Do you still feel that way today?
No, I mean, look, I think those are like thoughts and feelings that or at least my generation, every South Asian had. And like, I think my understanding of identity is like come together a lot more as I've become more confident and older and developed my needs for my happiness and not the happiness of like my parents or anyone else. I do think I have these two parts of me that are creativity and commerce. I probably identify more as like a New Yorker than anything else.
Yeah. The way we see ourselves keeps changing, right? So like if you said this 11 something years ago, that's not necessarily how you're seeing yourself now. That's part of evolution too. And maybe that's something that's a luxury that our generation has, where we are able to keep redefining ourselves and kind of reconfiguring how we see ourselves and what is the particular struggle and what are the particular gifts that I have that I should identify myself with now.
Yeah, or like, I can't say this for myself, but like, becoming a parent, your identity is less like, oh, am I Indian, am I American? It's like, I'm a parent. I need to put my kid to sleep. I need to put food on the table. I'm less like, oh my God, am I Indian, am I American? I'm like, no, I'm someone who doesn't sleep enough, like, so those are things. And I think, honestly, touching on sleep, when I went back to Stuyvesant and I spoke to the students, I remember there was something we would say that was like, either you can only have 2 out of 3 things. You could have good grades, you could have a social life, or you could have sleep. And, a lot of the kids like I didn't sleep enough, honestly. And I think that doing that in my teenage years, prefrontal cortex not developed, like it really impacted my sleep hygiene for the rest of my life. And like, so I remember telling these kids like, whatever y'all are doing, just get your sleep. You know what I mean? Like, prioritize your sleep. And I remember just like, what would I say to me that I needed to hear when I was 16 if somebody came to the school? And it was a class about writing for change. And, I told them that like your work can make a difference. Like some of the work I did from my music ended up like helping along the redistricting of city council lines in Richmond Hill and Belrose, or getting a taxi stand on Houston Avenue in front of Punjabi Delhi so they stopped getting tickets. So, the idea was like, how do you use your words to enact actual change? And I got to go back and speak to these students, and like, the main thing I was saying is just like, you don't always have to be like path obsessed. Like your path will find you, education for education's sake, learning for learning's sake. And that like, this kind of Rainer Maria Rilke thing of like, don't get obsessed with the questions, but live your way into the answers. You're 16, you don't really need to know exactly what you're going to do. That's not going to set you back from like where you're meant to be. And you'll get where you need to go. But prioritize your health and like, keep learning. Like education never stops. And don't just like read for like tests. Read. learn. You'll always keep moving forward, and whatever that might not be the type of forward you're looking at, but there's a lot of different types of forward.
That's great. That's a really good piece of advice. So you're saying, I mean, obviously, yes, read for pleasure, read to, for the love of the game, but also just know there's different kinds of moving.
Yeah, I mean, I also think I was just so path obsessed. And honestly, I'm kind of like course correcting back to that now. So it's not necessarily like you can course correct. I understand both sides. Like, I understand the importance of like securing like a high quality of life and going to school to get a job. But I had like a liberal arts education, and I really valued that because I learned a lot of different things. And I feel like in any room I can hold my own now because I can talk about all these different things. And I didn't necessarily feel like that coming out of K through 12 in public schools in New York, And that sucks because that means like the education that was the most expensive is what set me up best for the world, not the education that was like available. And that's not to poo-poo the education I had. It got me there, right? But once I was there, I didn't feel prepared the way that a lot of kids from private schools felt. So that's a whole other conversation, I think.
Yeah, private versus public, and like what are the actual experiences you want kids to have, and yeah, that's a tough one.
I mean, these private schools in New York City, I didn't know about these. I thought Stuyvesant was the best school, and then I got to college and I found out about like Dalton and like places like that charge like now $80,000 a year for high school. That's insane. It's not what it should cost to set you up for like success in the future, and you're just honestly doing a lot of that to just meet kids that are also like from that same like class and stuff. But I do think like I had a good education. I just didn't feel prepared necessarily for the circles that I would end up in as somebody in the arts, and as somebody that would be around very well educated like upper class people that I didn't grow up with.
You kind of touched on this already, but I want to circle back to something you said earlier about how you're kind of maybe pivoting back towards commerce. Do you still feel pressure to live a different kind of life? Are you feeling like you're in alignment with whatever your version of success is, whatever success means to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is that like if I feel that pressure, it comes from myself, right? It's not coming from somewhere else. The thing about identity now is just like my identity isn't coming down to me. Like it's my identity coming out of me and into me. And like, it's not this kind of like thing. It's like a this. So I do feel that pressure, and I think everyone's feeling that pressure right now. Like gas is expensive, groceries are expensive, rent in New York is expensive. And a lot of the things that our parents wanted for us were not like poorly intentioned. They, for someone like me that goes like which way the wind blows, I understand both sides. I'm not like, I don't have this like notion of glorifying the struggling artist. I think the artist shouldn't have to struggle, but like I've always been responsible for like the business side of my music, and I think like I had to do that, and I'm glad I did that. Am I going to stop like creating things? Like I doubt it. Or am I going to stop consuming art? Especially doubt that. So there's other ways that I can remain kind of like feeding like the creative part of my soul that might not necessarily be my career. But yeah, I feel that pressure from myself now, and that's, I think, maybe a healthier pressure.
Yeah, it's not coming top down. It's not someone telling you, here's what your life should look like. It's you deciding, oh, this is the lever I need to pull to, make my life feel more successful in whatever success means to you that day or that year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I never was one to like qualify success as a purely quantitative measure of like financial gain and status, which is like, sure, that is one of the markers. But do I also only measure success as something like the capital, like the cultural capital I have? Like, no. The cultural capital doesn't necessarily put food on my table. But like financial capital also doesn't feed my soul.
Yeah, and yeah, perfect segue because my question was going to be, what would you tell young South Asian creative kids? And you touched on it when you talked about your advice to when you went back to your high school and you told them they need to sleep. But for the kids who right now are like, oh, I want to be an artist, or oh, I need to go and make money, like what would you tell like a 12-year-old who's like, I just want to make art for my whole life?
I had this conversation with somebody at like a party yesterday, and they were like kind of like Gen Z, and I think like if I were to say right now like don't quit your day job, that's not as an insult. That's just like secure the bag. You know what I mean? Like on some like New York shit. Just like get the bag and then make the work, and when the work like exceeds the bag, like, and the work has its own bag, then move to like the creative work. Like you have like, even you need a certain quality of life to create too. I think like artists historically like centuries ago would be like put up on pedestals and treated well and taken care of, and like the noble class would like treat them well, take care of them, feed them, you know, and like they could just live in this bubble and create, and that's beautiful. But we don't live in a society like that. So, you know, I would say just like you are gonna need to have a balance. And so much of like, I get into this conversation a lot, like some of the best investors I know are creative, and some of the best like creatives I know have a good sense of business, and like you just need to be both. Even if you're not doing what I did, and like managing yourself and running your own record label, and like maybe I did too much of that, and I wish I had sometimes like a better balance of just creating and being able to just create without thinking of these things, and somebody else could come in and handle the business. That is valid too, you know what I mean? But like, I will say this also. I've had white collar jobs, and more recently I've had blue collar jobs too. And I was probably the happiest working a blue collar job like than I've ever been going into an office at like Spotify, or like hiring people at hedge funds, like moving boxes around in a warehouse and dealing with like operations and logistics, and like just talking shit with those guys, and kind of resetting what my relationship with money was like in the last like year has made me so happy. As long as you have enough to put food on your table, put a roof over your head, like everything else is ego. And yes, I want to put a better roof over my head now. I want to put better food on the table now, but I needed to like reset what my relationship with money is like. I think the real question people need to think about is like, how much money do I need? You know, what is a need and what is a want? And like, and what is the cost of a want versus a need? You know, I think these are the things that we really need to sit down and think about. And how much of it is like what you're kind of like hinting at, which is like, what will people say if you do this? Like when I went to Wesleyan, I was around kids that spent like mad money on college and then came out and would bus tables or work on a farm. And like, eventually those kids are now doing brilliant, groundbreaking things in farming and restaurant business. But like the idea of like a South Asian coming out and being like, you just went to Harvard, now you're busting tables, would be unheard of. But like I've seen people's career paths just follow, like maybe it's a spiritual thing, but you'll get where you need to be going, you know? Just work hard and like be kind and like have faith.
That's the advice that the young creative kids need to hear. That's it right there.
Yeah, and like I've struggled a lot in my life. I'm not saying I know the formula by any means, you know, and I've struggled with working hard, I've struggled with being kind, and I've struggled with having faith, you know, but when those three things are firing at all cylinders, then I feel like my life is the best, you know, and it's filled with like gratitude for what I have, not, you know, lust for what I don't. You know, that's kind of like where I want to be.
If you were to flip that question and say, what do you wish teachers today knew about South Asian kids? What would you tell them if you could just like get in teachers' ears?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just think that we don't come ready and packaged for like success. You know, we're not like robots, and that, you know, it's not like a malfunction when we're not the docile students you thought we were supposed to be. It's reality. And you know, I think like my thoughts went to like, do you understand what's going on at home, like and like how much do you understand what's going on at home, and you know, how much of it is like, oh, we don't understand that culture, so we don't get too involved in it. And I think that's a really tough job being a teacher, right? You can't like meddle also in like people's childhoods and like in their parenting and stuff. But I just think like, you know, what are those expectations look like at home? As long as we keep on going out there and being like, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're engineers, look at us, people are going to think like, this kid doesn't need help, that kid needs help, you know? And maybe that kid does need more help and that kid should get more attention. But that's not to say that this kid shouldn't get attention. I mean, I don't want to say these things because I don't know the reality of it, and so I don't want to generalize. But I just hope like child by child, it's like a case by case basis, and you're really just like, you're not like, oh, I don't need to worry about my Indian students, they're great. Students need to be treated case by case. The same thing I would say as a parent is if one of your kids is good at one thing and another is good at another thing, you're not, the goal isn't to make this kid just as good at that kid is at this thing. The goal is to just nurture what they are good at, work on what they're not good at, and like, you know, really go case by case. And it's hard as a teacher, it's hard as a parent. Do you have the time to really do that? So I don't, for me to be someone who doesn't teach, who doesn't have kids, does it even matter what I'm saying, to be honest with you? Like, I make rap songs. Like, I don't know.
You're a person. You're a person. You went to school. You had your experiences. You're allowed to say, "This is what I wish they knew."
I know. My advice would be don't generalize, but I'm literally generalizing as I'm saying that. So
If it helps, in my research, 68.2% of my participants, which were all South Asian American adults, said they felt their teachers believed that, believed in the model minority myth and believed they needed less support than their peers. So you're generalizing, sure, but the data backs up your generalization.
Yeah, that would just be it. It's like you don't know what we're going through. Just like check in a little bit and like, see what's going on at home. Because a lot of the South Asians I know are not coming from good home situations. And you have like situations at home that are just like a lot of expectations, not a lot of love. And like use the resources that are available. If you're not getting them from your teacher, find out where to get them. And like, one big thing I would say is not to teachers, it's to students. Go use that guidance counselor. I mean,
they're there for a reason.
Yeah, like I don't know. I would just go and talk about like underground rap with like my guidance counselor, but like that like made me feel a little bit more seen, and that like helped me a lot,
And that gave you that connection that so many South Asians don't have in school, where they're like, I don't have a single adult in this building who understands me or cares about me, but you can find that outside of your classroom teacher.
Yeah, and they don't have to be Indian. You know what I mean? That's another thing. It's like, not, honestly, that's why it's not just am I Indian, am I American, and that was definitely something that consumed me. I don't judge people for that, but I think that's like the first stepping stone to like more serious existential questions of like, who am I and what's my purpose? Rather than like, who am I, what's my job path?
Okay, I feel bad because you just asked an existential question, and my final question is not existential by any means. It's about your Swet Shop Boys song "Birding." If I can make a very strange segue, that's like my favorite song off the entire Swet Shop Boys discography.
Are you a birder?
I'm not a birder, but I had like just heard a podcast or something where someone was like, if you want to be less anxious, you have to start becoming aware of the things around you in nature. So like trees and birds. And I had just heard that podcast and then I heard birding. And so I want to know, and I know you're talking about like checking out girls. It's like the bird.
No, I'm really talking about birds.
Are you really talking about birds?
Yeah. I mean, there's like a slight play on words there, but I'm literally just naming all the birds that like worked with rhyming. Like,
okay, so you're not like into birds. Are you into birds or you just were looking for birds that rhymed?
No, I'm a little bit into birds. It probably happened more after the song. I think like after my dad passed, I got into a couple different things that were like gardening. I grow vegetables. I noticed a lot more birds around where I was living at the time, like cardinals and blue jays and robins and mourning doves. And I got into soccer a lot. And so those are like three things that helped me. But like I definitely think like being present is like one of the things that I've had to work on a lot. And even just like grounding techniques, like point at everything black in the room, or like scent, using oils not just to like be fancy, but to like actually like be able to ground myself, or touch, like wearing nice fabric, but not just to like look, but like to be able to ground myself. I have a group chat with some of my friends from Wesleyan, and the two things that we talk about or share are, besides like pictures of their children, are like birds and soccer. So those are like two things I'm definitely into. I live near the Ridgewood like reservoir, and like I hear there's good birding there, so that's on the list. I did, and I'm gonna get again the Audubon app, which allows you to see like which birds are like around you and near you. I said this in another interview recently, but like I think a lot about like saving things for like certain points in life. So like 45, I want to get into woodworking. Like 50, I want to get into like maybe the Grateful Dead or something. 55, I want to get into being like a healer and a self-help guy and just like replacing Jay Shetty.
All right.
That's my thing that I want to do. Think like a punk instead of think like a monk is like gonna be my thing. And
that's gonna line up well because you'll have just gotten into the Grateful Dead just a few years prior.
Yeah, so I've already gotten my like New York City punk thing down. So I think like birding is something that I'm also just like, I was kind of hinting at it in life before, but now I want to like really get into it. I think it's great.
That's great. And that song is genuinely one of my favorites. Thank you so much, Himanshu, for being here with me today for the Brown Voices Project, for sharing your story, talking about your childhood, and of course for being an inspiration both to our generation and to the next generation. And congratulations for living your own version of success and creating your own path.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad we got to talk about this. It's stuff I've been thinking about recently a lot. So, and congratulations on publishing your book again.
Thank you.
Take care.
This has been a conversation with Himanshu Suri for the Brown Voices Be Inspired Project. Subscribe for more.